Dive into the chilling mystery of The Scary Vampire Murders by Rod Ferrell's Cult. Unravel the eerie tale of bloodlust and darkness that shook a community. Ready for spine-tingling revelations? Subscribe now and ask yourself, can true horror be stranger than fiction? Rod Ferrell was a 16-year-old kid from Murray, Kentucky, whose beliefs led him to head a ceremonial cult and brutally murder the parents of a 14-year-old member. He was the youngest person on execution row until his sentence was commuted to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Roderick did not have an easy childhood. On March 28, 1980, he was born in Murray to his then 16-year-old mother, Sandra Gibson. His father abandoned him to join the military and was never seen again. According to federal court records, his maternal grandpa allegedly sexually molested him when he was around 5 years old, but no criminal charges were ever filed. Sandra and Rod had a tumultuous home life, going back and forth between her parents and public housing. Sandra was a sex worker and exotic dancer who introduced Rod to vampires and the macabre. They became friends over Dracula movies and comic books. Sandra was an unsuitable mother, and at the age of 34, she was discovered writing unsettling love letters to a 14-year-old kid. Sandra Gibson, a vampire, wishes to be close to Murray and hopes to become a member of the family. Scott Anderson, Chastity Kesey, Dana Cooper, and Heather Windorf, members of the vampire clan, all hail from sad backgrounds. They find solace with a group of like-minded individuals who attend the Vampire Hotel in the land between the lakes. Rod becomes obsessed after hearing rumors about Heather's mistreatment and invests several $100s on long-distance phone bills for the Windorf family. Rod rallies his crew to save Heather and flee to New Orleans to form their own vampire family after her parents cut her off the phone. However, things do not go as intended, and the vampire clan faces new problems. Rod and the gang drove the 750 miles from Murray, Kentucky to Eustis, Florida on November 25, 1996. After being picked up and their vehicle breaking down, Heather struck a deal with Rod in which she would use her keys to unlock her house, allowing her family's vehicle to be stolen and the clan to make their journey to New Orleans. Rod consented to undertake the turning process, in which she would eat his blood and become a vampire for good. The event took place in an Eustis cemetery early that morning. Rod took a lot of LSD before admitting to ingesting Roderick's blood from a self-inflicted razor blade wound. Soon later, the party left to get the automobile from Heather's residence. When Roderick and Scott arrived at the Windorf residence, they proceeded through the garage and discovered Mr. Windorf sound sleeping on the living room couch. After many seconds of silence and deliberation, Mr. Windorf awoke to find his skull being brutally battered in by Roderick and the crowbar Rod had brought in with him. Mr. Windorf took nearly 22 punches to the face. Mrs. Windorf approached the living room from the kitchen after hearing the noise and seeing her husband being assaulted to death by intruders. In an attempt to stop the heinous act, she sprayed scorching hot coffee in Roderick's face, who replied with a crowbar blow to the face. The blow was so powerful that it destroyed her brain stem and killed her instantly. Roderick Ferrell confesses to the murder of Ruth Windorf, stating that he had blood on him and a crowbar in his hand. He was about to have coffee with her, but she lunged at him, causing him to stab her through her skull. Ferrell beat her until her brains fell on the floor, which angered him. After the murder, Roderick and Scott ritualistically burned their victims and danced around their bodies, stealing valuables before leaving in the family's Ford Explorer. The bodies would be discovered by Heather's 17-year-old sister, Jennifer, when she returned home from work that night. Heather was unaware her parents had been murdered until later, assuming everything had gone to plan. Murder warrants were issued for the group of adolescents on November 27, and they were finally apprehended by police on November 28 after they followed a call that was made by Chastity when she called her grandparents pleading for money. Scott Anderson, the youngest American to be on death row, was sentenced to 2 life sentences for 2 murders. Anderson claimed he never touched Mr. or Mrs. Windorf and failed to calm Roderick, who went crazy and stabbed them. Despite initially denying the accusations, Anderson pled guilty to first-degree murder, robbery, and burglary, making him the youngest American to be on death row. Scott Anderson received 2 life sentences in prison. The amount of his involvement in the murders has come under question, though he claims he never touched Mr. or Mrs. Windorf and attempted and failed to calm a raging Roderick, who proceeded to go crazy and bash their skulls in with the crowbar. Chastity Kesey and Dana Cooper agreed to plea bargains in exchange for shorter sentences. Charity was sentenced to 10 years in prison, released in 2008, and Dana to 17 years, released in 2015. Scott's sentence was recently reduced to 40 years in prison in 2018, taking into account the 22 years he has previously served. Scott Anderson will be 51 years old when he gets released in 2032. Rod Ferrell's death sentence was commuted to life in prison in 2000 after the Florida Supreme Court declared that defendants must be 17 or older at the time charges were brought to be executed. Roderick is still serving his life term at the Tomoka Correctional Institution. What people are capable of actually scares me. Would Roderick have done these horrible things if he hadn't been subjected to so much misery and torment? Thank you for delving into the chilling depths of the scary vampire murders with us. Dive deeper into the world of true crime by liking, commenting, sharing, and subscribing. More spine-tingling stories await. Stay captivated, stay curious, and stay tuned for more.